This video is for students who are looking for an overview and some modeling of the activities in day 19 of Unit 3, which, as we can see here, is about applying historical empathy to evaluate whether the work of Tammany Hall represented progress or decline of American society. If your teacher has been having you follow the Passport to Social Studies curriculum, you have been considering this question at the end of most lessons in this sequence. And the reason is that each day we want you to consider this question through a slightly different lens, and today's is going to be about political machines. Before getting into the main parts of this lesson, let's start by taking a closer look at some of the concepts that are going to be really important today. And you can see up here in the directions, it says provide an example in the right column of one of the following definitions today. So, for instance, with the first one, we have laissez-faire. And can you think of a current example of the government not interfering in economic affairs that are more than just protecting private property or keeping the peace? And examples of economic affairs could be anything related to employment, wages and income, or even monetary or fiscal policy. For graft, have you heard of individuals, usually business people or politicians, who obtain money, favors, or power through dishonest or maybe even illegal ways? The word we use here is questionable. For spoils, what are some current examples you can think of where somebody received something valuable like a gift, a job, or a favor in return for something, or just for knowing the right person? Political machines might be one of the more difficult ones for you to find a modern day connection to. And I actually had to look this up because they are certainly not as commonplace as they once were. There are some pundits who argue that the way a recent president used his power and influence was a little reminiscent of political machines of 150 years ago. However, usually political machines are more focused on local politics, such as cities, counties, and at most the state level. Political machines have been on the decline in the United States for several reasons, including changing demographics in America's cities, which have lessened the political boss's influence, and a reduction of the type and amount of jobs that were commonly promised in exchange for votes. If you do want to look one up that is from the less distant past, look up Richard Daley and the political machine he established in Chicago in the 1950s up until about the 1970s. Once you have this done, on this next slide, you are asked to actually apply them to the work you did in previous lessons regarding the differences between the rich and poor during the Gilded Age. If possible, you'll definitely want to look back and review your work from lessons 13 to 18 to help you with this. As a further introduction to political machines from the point of view of one of its members, we'll then read this text by George Plinkett, who was a member of the Tammany Hall political machine that dominated New York City politics in the 18th and early 19th centuries. And as you are reading this account, you'll see our word graft right here. And you'll see that when he does try to make the distinction between honest graft and dishonest graft. And when you're considering this, and I'll move this, when you're considering this question down here, remind yourself that he was one of the perpetrators of these immoral and sometimes illegal actions. So don't forget this as you read his attempt at rationalizing his actions as being honest graft. Some of the best sources that we have from this time period are the political cartoons, I'll move this up here, made by Thomas Nast. His biting anti-Tammany Hall cartoons expose the graft and other underhanded actions of the organization and its leader, William Boss Tweed. And this medium was so effective because it conveyed its messages about graft, spoils, corruption, bribery, and all the other illegal activities to the public, even if the viewer couldn't read or understand English. In fact, there is a story that when Boss Tweed broke out of a New York City jail and was a fugitive living in Spain, he was arrested there and extradited back to the United States after a Spanish citizen recognized him from those Nast cartoons. So we are going to analyze one of these Nast cartoons together first as a model. The one that we're going to be modeling is The Power Behind the Throne. Then you will be able to choose a Nast cartoon of your own that you will work on independently. So before we take a look at this cartoon, here is a picture of Boss Tweed from the Library of Congress. Study his face well, and then once you have a pretty good grasp on his facial features, see if you can identify him in this cartoon. Then again, revisit the title up here, and maybe the title makes a little more sense to you. From there, you are going to answer these 3 guiding questions. And once you're done, you're going to go to this slide, where this is where you actually get to choose one of the Nast cartoons that you're going to work on independently. And you are then going to create a narrative sequence in the blue box that's provided for whatever cartoon you pick. And it's important you do a really thorough job on this, because that narrative sequence you create, it is going to be useful as you create the context for the historical empathy tool, which is going to be one of the later parts of this lesson. Once you created the narrative for the Nast cartoon of your choosing, you are then going to read a passage from Terry Galway's book, Machine Made, where he provides a more sympathetic perspective on Tammany Hall than most historians do. Before getting into this, though, you should use this slide to remind yourself what historical empathy is, and also what it is not. We've referenced historical empathy in the last few lessons lately. However, the last time we actually went through the entire process was way back on day 14, when we used it to examine perspectives on immigration. If you feel this definition, this given one right here, isn't enough for you to write your own explanation in your own words, you can review your work from that lesson, or there's actually another video dedicated solely to modeling the historical empathy tool that is available for you to watch if needed. To support you through this reading, we recommend annotating the text using these 4 look-fors, which will not only reinforce you seeing the components of historical empathy in this text, but also make it easier to refer back to the text as you are going through the protocol on your own. For your convenience, we also did put the color key above both slides that contain the text. As you now begin the historical empathy process, for this first step, where it instructs you to base your answers on those that supported Tweed and Tammany Hall, this is where you're going to want to refer back to that narrative you created for the Nast cartoons, and also think back to that George Plinkett account, remember, it was about his view on the difference between honest and dishonest graft. And those 2 sources are definitely going to allow you to identify the historical circumstances surrounding Tammany Hall. And when you get to step 2, remember that you're completing this activity to empathize with the point of view of people like Terry Galway and George Plinkett. So again, remember to focus on the components that showed support for Tweed and Tammany Hall. The Nast cartoons were definitely opposed to him. Also, when you get to step 3, just remember that you are not sympathizing with Boss Tweed or any members of Tammany Hall. And for this last question, you might find it useful to also refer back to that earlier slide where you identified present-day examples of concepts like graft and spoils. Now that you have successfully completed the historical empathy protocol, it's time to think about how this new content impacted your understanding of America at this time. Does what you learned today show progress or decline within American society? And this is just another layer for you to consider as we examine this era.